in Bangladesh, and one of the most discussed in South Asia. And that was in 2012-13. So it's exactly 1 decade since these tragedies happened, which made the global value chain players and international agencies mandated to monitor policy making on labor standards, etc., to sit up and seriously discuss the grievous neglect of justice to workers in the sweatshops of developing countries, and also intensify their efforts to promote safe factories as an agenda. And it is an unfortunate coincidence that it was just yesterday that we heard of a massive blast in a chemical factory in Surat, where a fire broke out, and which actually finally extinguished at least 7 lives and injured many more. And for about 17 days prior to that, multiple rescue teams were practically moving the mountains to save the lives of 41 construction workers who went under the debris of a collapsed under construction tunnel in Uttarakhand. And if you go a little further, back, in May 2022, we heard of this fire in an electronic manufacturing factory in Delhi, which again killed about 27 people. By Indian government's own admission, between 2016 and 2021, at least 6,500 workers.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am, you went on mute accidentally.
Okay.
Huh.
Right. I was actually trying to say that I don't know till what I was audible. I was trying to say that the industrial accidents have become a kind of an order of the day in India and as elsewhere in South Asia or in other countries. And I think unofficial estimates or informal estimates tell us that between 2016 and 2021, on a daily basis, about 7 accidents were happening in India, in the manufacturing industries in India. So that's the that's a kind of a scenario within which we live, and there is absolutely no data available on accidents, deaths, injuries that happen every day in the millions of small unregistered factories in the country. And for Work Fair and Free Foundation and Ajivika Bureau, under whose wings we have been nurtured as an independent sort of a research and policy institution, working for safety of workers and safe working places is the very essence of our existence. So Professor Sumon's talk today is a very important activity event in the repertoire of activities that WFF is actually planning. And I'm grateful to Professor Sumon for kindly agreeing to speak. And we are also very grateful to all of you for taking time out to be part of this important conversation. So Professor Sumon, the floor is all yours. You could speak for about 35 minutes. So we can then sort of, have a question and answer sort of a session. Participants would be able to ask questions, and we can have a brief discussion around it before we wind up by around 5:35, 5:40. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. I probably got cut for a second. So thank you very much, Tara, for that introduction. I just want to make a small correction. My PhD was not on compensation. I actually did my PhD on indigenous rights issues in Bangladesh. And it was mostly about identity politics and how transnational indigeneity was an important factor in shaping this identity politics in Bangladesh. So that was back in 2012-13 when I completed my PhD. But it was after my PhD, unfortunately, during my final years of submission actually that Rana Plaza and Tazreen happened in 2012 and 2013. So you may say that it is immediately after my PhD work, I became interested about the labor question in Bangladesh and sort of started to think about this enormous industry that was all around us, and probably we had some sort of interest in it, but with Rana Plaza and Tazreen, the two extraordinary events of human loss and catastrophe, our interest started to, in my case, and some of my friends as well, we started to think about these issues actually. So I don't have a slide today. I'm so sorry about that. I plan to have this talk. I've structured it in a very simple way. I'm going to talk a little bit about how sort of I arrived at some questions with regard to labor studies. This is something that I want to discuss first, and then I would like to talk a little bit about two initiatives in Bangladesh. One is called Accord, Bangladesh Accord, and the other is RPA, that is called Rana Plaza Arrangement. So I'll discuss these two arrangements, if you like, and that came into being after Tazreen and Rana Plaza, and talk about some of the limitations of these arrangements as well. So I'd like to first of all say that I've titled this talk in a very slightly euphemistic way: After Tazreen Fire and Rana Plaza, a call for justice beyond technocratic fixes. So as I mentioned, I started to think about these questions after 2012 and 2013. It is not only me. I had my friends and colleagues and comrades who also started to, think about what went wrong with Tazreen and what went wrong with Rana Plaza. So I became interested to look at the garment work that was going around us. And interestingly, back in the 90s, when we were students, garment work was seen as an object, as a new research object, where our main concern was about women's participation in it and empowerment, if you like. So, and also women in microfinance was another sort of object of analysis in those days. But after the Tazreen Fire and Rana Plaza, our work involved meeting people on the ground, meeting family members of victims, and working under the banner of activist anthropologists. We formed a collective called Activist Anthropologists, and we even went for a public interest litigation against one of the owners in Bangladesh, especially the owner of Tazreen factory. So it was not necessarily through a very systematic research objective that we started this work. It was a chance affairs rather, where the fire happened, so we had to be there and we had to help people, and we started to, the first thing that we did in the site was that we started to collect the number of dead, because there's a politics with the number of dead as well. What is the exact figure of dead people in that particular site? So this is how we started to work amongst the workers who first survived the Tazreen Fire actually. So it was the family members, the injured family members, and also the family members of the dead, who had to go through a very difficult ordeal after the fire. And there was also this question of DNA testing for compensation and all that stuff. And some of us were very much involved with these work. Like we were sort of having a proper list of the dead people. So our figure has been different from the official figure from the very beginning. and also we had to even help people to go to DNA testing facilities, etc., because people didn't even know how to do that, because that was the one of a kind experience, and many people didn't know about it. So it is again, I mean, a chance affairs, and when we were, very much engrossed with Tazreen the victims in 2012, within a year, Rana Plaza happened. So again, scale-wise, Rana Plaza was even more spectacular. It has been dubbed as one of the most watched industrial disaster of the world. And in the case of Rana Plaza, the effort was even bigger. There were many organizations, there were many, relief efforts around Rana Plaza, and also as an activist platform, we also had our, participation in it. It was very, very exciting to see that after Rana Plaza, there were even student organizations who were trying to sort of account the number of dead, because there was this talk that maybe the number can vary from the government count. So I mean, in this context, I think I would say that I personally started to think about some questions, I would say, in regard to the workers and their plight in the garment industry. It is because it is around this time that a number of initiatives came into being in Bangladesh to to safeguard the workers in Bangladesh. So one particular effort was called Bangladesh Accord. It was Bangladesh Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh. That was one sort of initiative. It was a multi-sectoral initiative, and also RP, as I mentioned before. So when the question that really I started to think through in the event of these, in the backdrop of these events, is what governing mechanisms were put in place after the Tazreen and Rana Plaza disasters. What remedies were eventually planned in the wake of these two big events, where the states stood in all this, how compensation was meted out for Tazreen and Rana Plaza workers, and what are the effect of these compensation mechanisms, and what role the government played in it. Are MSIs or multi-sectoral initiatives a solution? How it changed the labor sector? Can we say that justice was served? So it is around these questions, and that I started to even write with my colleagues, and sometimes alone. I started to write, write a number of essays around these questions, and I'm not sure that I can really address all of these questions today, but these are some of the questions that persistently, I mean, I was trying to address these questions in my writing as well. So the question was, what happened after Tazreen and Rana Plaza is that we saw a number of newer private labor governance mechanisms. So and these were also, these are also known as hybrid governance mechanisms, also known as multi-sectoral initiatives, where the state has little role to play. And often these were supported or lauded by transnational activists, advocacy networks, who worked with big partnerships, who worked in partnership with big corporations. And also, interestingly, and very important also, that often the in these events, NGOs had a facilitating role and involved themselves in ethical learning. So in such initiatives, some authors argue that market incentives provide an impetus for firms to launch social responsibility initiatives and compete to capture ethically sensitive customers by bettering their social performances. Interestingly, scholars have noted that it has led to a paradoxical situation where the symbolic power of global lead firms as regulatory institutions has increased, although they remain devoid of democratic mechanisms in their own decision-making, as well as in accounting for the social outcomes of their accountability. So in anthropology of development, we have this idea about technocratic fixes. So and some anthropologists define technocratic fixes as mechanisms that provide short-term technical solutions to problems of a systemic and political economic nature. So here as well, scholars show that technocratic fixes leave untouched the unjust relations of domination and hierarchy that deplete and disempower workers in the normal operation of business. So in literature as well, I mean, as I mentioned, I arrived at some questions very, individually and sort of in a very bottom-up way. But in literature as well, we encountered that these were debated issues also. There were debates about this sort of newer mechanisms of governance where lead firms became even powerful. So so in the backdrop of these mechanisms, I became interested about Bangladesh Accord on fire and building safety in Bangladesh. So I probably some of you know that this came immediately after Rana Plaza, and this was a process that was there before Tazreen and Rana Plaza actually, but it was stalled and the government didn't have much interest. Bangladesh government didn't have much interest in implementing this. But after Rana Plaza, of course, unfortunately, because it was a spectacular event, somehow government conceded and somehow they accepted this sort of arrangement where transnational activists were very much involved in implementing this particular mechanism. So it was from the very beginning lauded by transnational activists. It promised independent inspection and public disclosure of inspection reports on a regular basis. It also had, objectives of empowering the workers, but what it did not, it did not take into account the everyday. This is something that we're trying to argue, that it did not take into account the everyday livelihood situation of the workers, and looked at workers' problem from the perspective of workplace security in the narrowest technical sense of the term. So it only looked at the building integrity, and looked away from some of the other burning issues of workers that really were important. So so why do we say that? Why do we say this? I mean, it is very difficult to, this is an argument that we want to make, but let me give you just one example. I mean, immediately after Tazreen and Rana Plaza, when Accord came into being, we did some surveys, for very different purposes, but it involved a large sample. And we were somewhat shocked to see that the workers in Dhaka, Narayanganj, and Chittagong, we expected that after all these, mechanisms, all these efforts taking place, and there will be some sort of impact, some sort of conversation around these issues. But interestingly, when we had this, conducted this survey, we didn't see any immediate effect of these conversations and discussions, and also some of the real work that was going on around this sector. So we were puzzled to see that all the technocratic fix didn't have any visible impact in the workers' understanding of the situation. So there was no clear idea of a code, for example, and workers could only say if their factories were compliant factories or not, but nothing much. Our random sampling of workers could not capture any significant impact on the workers. So, and also surprisingly, or unfortunately rather, poor rates of contract continued to be reported. Laws were commonly flouted by the management. Female workers commonly reported of their denial of maternity rights. A lot of remained, the workers say that a lot of remained a show. Government guidelines for reporting sexual harassment was only in paper and for show. Workers laughed out about it, but due to competitions for jobs, would not complain about it. So this was one experience, but there are other circumstantial evidences which suggest that even the way Bangladesh Accord was initiated in Bangladesh, it could not, continue its status as such, because eventually by 2018, when the when there was no more attention to garment sector in Bangladesh, the Bangladesh Accord had to go through some legal procedures, and eventually this whole mechanism was renamed and sort of made into a national organization. So I mean, these are all examples of how technocratic fix, I mean, short-term solutions, but in the long run, this mechanism couldn't be there in the way it started initially. So the other case that I would like to discuss is the Rana Plaza arrangement. So again, I'm sure some of you know that in 2013 Rana Plaza happened, and it was a disaster in terms of industrial accident in Bangladesh. It was huge and big, and it was dubbed as a tragedy in Bangladesh's industrial history. So and after that, with Rana Plaza arrangement, this was also another arrangement there, where international stakeholders were very much playing a role, and government and a fund was collected, a trust fund was formed, and funds were collected, where brands were mostly providing the fund, and government had a very little role to play. Bangladesh government had a little role to play. So again, this was dubbed as a compensation in Bangladesh, although on paper this is not a compensation. It was seen, I mean, it used some workers' rights, but it didn't have that sort of it mainly used ILO 121 as a framework for disbursing some funds for the workers. So what happened after RPA, workers received very low payment, and this low payment, this led to inability to rebuild life. I mean, this is something we found in a different study, and also what we see is that the structural underpayment continued in this case. So, and the workers, the ones who were seen as survivors and were defined as survivors in this particular case, didn't appreciate the effort, actually, because the money came in intervals, and it was not given in one go. So these were some of the things that created a lot of grievance amongst the workers. And also what we see immediately, I mean, even though RPA was arranged, we see that some public interest litigations and criminal charges against the owners of Rana Plaza building, owners of the farm that were in Rana Plaza building remain unresolved. So there was a widespread discontent, if you like, among the workers. For example, one worker said that even if we are not given any more money, we still want Rana is the owner of that building. Rana want to get punished. The culprit forced all the girls to work that day. He threatened them not to pay if they didn't work. I mean, for those who don't know the context, I mean, there was cracks found in the building just 2-3 days before the building collapse. So, and people knew about the dangers, but still workers were forced to enter, and because there was probably several workload in those days. So and the owner was forcing the workers to enter the structure. So this is another example that even though RPA was implemented, but the survivors were not happy about the amount received. Survivors in Rana Plaza also there was this issue of a sense of entitlement, and sense of entitlement to have more. So that also created a problem because of these extraordinary events. The workers had an entitlement, that expectations, but that expectation was never met. Although the trade body and the government usually sort of say that they received a lot of money. They have been compensated and given a lot of money. So that also created a misconception that the Rana Plaza survivors have received hefty sum of compensation, and as a result of that, even we found cases where workers were denied work because people thought that they probably have enough money in their pocket. So and one of the extreme case I would say is this hapless survivor who was recently attacked by some local thugs because they thought that he had received a lot of money because of RPA and all other, and he was this boy was a young man, was severely injured. So I mean, all of that somehow suggests that these quick fixes, if you like, that took place. I mean, it doesn't really satisfy the people on the ground. So in course of, I mean, I haven't mentioned about the backdrop of this particular study that I did with my colleague Rebecca Prentice. I mean, in course of this work, we also found that it is usually, I mean, a lot of the interlocutors usually think that it is the state which is responsible for compensation. So there's always this expectation from the rastro rather than some company arranging something for us. That sort of discussion is that sort of aspiration is commonly found among the workers of Rana Plaza victims. So in such a context, I think what I would like to sort of argue is that in GPN literature, there's this idea that okay, this global production system is a global system, so there are a lot of flows amongst the different actors and networks. So, but in course of analyzing these two cases, what we note is that at the end of the day, it is very important to also keep in mind that where these factories are really located, in which context, in which state. So states are very important, and I think that although it might sound a bit unfashionable, but I would like to argue that we have to think about the very context in which these factory establishments are actually placed. Although we know that it is because of bad governance that some of these transnational initiatives have, come around. That is true, but at the same time, we cannot steal outright, think that the state's role is not important. So this is something that I singularly want to argue in this particular talk, and also want to sort of call for a democratization of the GPN, in the sense that we have state as an important contributor, and state also has a very important historical role in ensuring good governance for the workers in all countries, even though all these different factories are part of a larger production system and in a global production system. So I would like to stop here, and I'm sure that I haven't given a lot of context about some of the work that we did. So I would like to stop here, and might answer some questions for the time being. Yeah.
Well, I think you have raised an extremely kind of, in very many ways, it's quite a provocative sort of a presentation, because wherein you have called to question the kind of short-term sort of adjustments that we generally make, which look very very grand, because a lot of players are involved in that, and these brand companies are part of these arrangements, and international agencies have their presence, and of course, as you said, national, international NGOs are they play a very important role. So it actually look a very grand alliance, on the face of it, but they really do not perhaps lead to many strategic resolutions. They can be smaller, short-term solutions, but it doesn't resolve any of the structural, institutional sort of, what do you call it, the factors around it. I think absolutely wonderful way to put it. And of course, when you say that, when you talk about governance, you need to really bring in the state, because it has credibility, and it has perhaps the resources, it has the legitimacy, it has all the associated characteristics, which would definitely sort of, makes it the most, eminent sort of a entity which can really work towards a long-lasting, strategic, long-term resolution of these things. I think these are extremely important sort of points. I think I presume that we have at the other point, I think we need to, from our own kind of context of work, is when you're talking about local governance is becoming a very determining sort of a thing, where these factories are located. Very often these factories are located in the cusp of governance confusion. These are no man's land, or nobody claims it, and the city administration doesn't want to look at it. The state denies its existence, but that's where the brands are reproducing their making profit and reproducing things. But we have perhaps a lot of, and I think we have even in the Ajivika Bureau Work Fair and Free community, I see a large number of our colleagues here who work in these kinds of settings like Surat or Bombay, or like those kinds of places where the factories themselves are kind of working in a fairly amorphous, hazy sort of setting, administrative governance setting. So I think we'll have questions. Even there are, I've seen a lot of other people who have joined. Now the floor is open for questions, discussion, even sharing our own sort of concerns and points and things like that. Yeah.
So I want to ask something right now because I have some other meeting.
Please.
Please permit me just very brief.
Yeah, of course.
Not many questions, but then it's a very interesting presentation, obviously, and we also know that this whole.
The audio is a little unclear to me, or for everyone?
Yeah.
Clear now?
Yeah, it's clear now.
So See, one thing is this whole focus on these GPNs, the global production networks, has been certain huge crowd there out there who have been sort of promoting this as the win-win situation for the developing economies, and who essentially are working as the international subcontractors, even if you do not use that word very much. The other thing is about within GPNs. I mean, when you have a certain, let's say, contract of framework, you do not say anything about the tier 2, tier 3 forms. And that's where all these accidents have taken place. And as you know better than me, I mean, even when the Tazreen thing happened in 2012, there was also similar event happened in Karachi in the early enterprises in 2012, in which some estimated 289 people have died. But that also reminds us of 1911, that is more than 100 years back, since this event happened in the Triangle Shirtwaist factory in New York, sort of like where a large number of sort of women garment workers who sort of were migrant workers who should they so burnt to death, or either they jumped from the 8th and 9th floor of the building where it was located. So that leads to a complete change of the industrial policy of the United States of America. That also leads to the labor standards that the ILO is now talking about. But then when the Rana Plaza happens, so there is no way that we know that who all are these people, and not even talking about the individuals who died, but we do not know which are the companies. And as you know much better than me, that it is actually from the what you call the tags of the collars of the shirts, from where they found out these are some of the famous brands. So they must have been the global buyers for this. Now, once this happens, there is very little, as you so very rightly said, very little the state has been doing. So the state was never part of the contract with the tier 2, tier 3 farms. And the second thing is when you have the UN Compact, which like sort of essentially a kind of crowd of, I'd say, crowd promoted by or whatever, by the capital. They join in and they say they create a certain fund, saying, oh, if something goes wrong, then we'll be funding. But then, so where does it lead us? These accidents are going to happen. And as Tara was telling in the beginning, it happened even yesterday. So I think we need to raise a question about the role of the state in promoting these GPS, and in which I think we really need to rethink. So it's not just these sporadic events, but I think it's a larger question of industrial policy, which we may question. So sorry, guys, I was quite sort of impressed by your talk. So any comments on that? Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I took a lot of time.
Yeah, thank you very much. You have really nicely put that perspective. Yeah, I mean, I haven't discussed about the tier 2, 3. You have rightly pointed out that Accord, Bangladesh Accord, was only working with all those factories from which they actually sold the brands. But you know, there's this discussion about subcontracting. We don't use this word tier 2 to tier 3, but we understand that a good percentage of that subcontracting firms were not within the purview of their remedial activities and inspections also. So interestingly, Bangladesh government was actually taking care of those farms actually, but it was attempted to be a coordinated effort. But in the process, I think that this whole thing has become even more complicated. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are similarities, and again, I mean, you have very importantly pointed out that where does it lead us, and this is very important. And what I personally feel, and I can see that you'll be surprised to know that down here in Bangladesh, the trade unionists nowadays think that NGOs are not their allies. Sometimes you see this kind of discussion. I was Googling something today, and I found that there's experts are saying that NGOs are one of the problems. So what has happened is there's a lot of, I would say, miscommunication, lack of understanding, and all of that really becomes important. And also maybe there are other factors that might because of the NGOs, they usually have a lot of power, money, and that creates a lot of disjuncture in the field as well. So you have long trade unionists who are working in the field for many years, and then you suddenly have an NGO, they have more power, that creates a lot of, instead of having a solidarity, the movement has really fragmented. I don't know about that in the Indian context, but this is what happens. So I think that it is important for us, scholars and activists in the global South, to also start, talking about it and also theorizing it, instead of just reproducing what is coming from transnational networks. That is something that I think this is also part of it, I think.
So in fact, I have some two papers on this, maybe I'll sort of share with you. And
Please.
so one actually focusing on the labor agency of the GPN workers, particularly belonging to the tier 2, tier 3 firms. So with that, I stop. I'm sorry I took more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, what you've mentioned about this, apparent mistrust between, or the blocks to solidarity building between civil society organizations and trade unions, is, I think it's also true of India. I think, we belong to a family which really tries to sort of straddle that, that space. We have unions, and we also have, a non-government, a non-profit format. But it's not very easy to build alliances, because you are also seen as a unnecessarily hybrid organization, who perhaps will not sit comfortably in either camps. So I think it's not very, as you said, it's not very easy to create that kind of build those solidarities, which would have really helped in bringing kind of the real core labor issue to focus. You all through you said that a lot of things have happened, but the core issues are really declined, have really stand neglected, because people still get lower wages and people still do not get their entitlements properly. But still we have compacts, we have arrangements, agreements, mechanisms, but nothing has changed structurally when it comes to the issue of labor. I think, please, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just one point. I mean, in the last 1 month, one worker died because they were campaigning for better wage because of police violence. Yeah.
Right. Please. Divya, any the questions? Anything that you would like to?
No, I think Gokul has raised.
Yeah.
Gokul,
Okay.
Gokul, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just like looking at the macro level beyond Rana Plaza and Tazreen fire incident. I mean, the state intervention and effective governance is hindered majorly due to the threat of the global capital mobility in global South. And scholars have been arguing about a spatial fix for the labor spatial fix for the capital and the labor conflict at the production countries, and that could address the political will of the state interventions in the labor issues. What do you think about it, and what would you like to comment on it?
I probably didn't get the first part of your question again. Could you please repeat?
No. So the state intervention and the effective governance is hindered majorly due to the threat of the global capital mobility. So the global capital keep on moving from Bangladesh to India, and then especially in garments it's keep on happening. And it's happening in other sectors.
I got it. Yeah. No, I think no. I mean, I think that is not true actually. I mean, I don't think that this sector is really that footloose. So, in other words, I would say that because this also requires a lot of establishment. I mean, these garment work factories also is a big thing in Bangladesh. So it is not very easy for an outright a loose contract. It's not like that. But I would say that it is the usually the trade bodies try to use that as a pretext, and somehow try to use that as a leverage point and sort of influence the government to take negative steps for the workers. So I would say that it is a trade that is useful for the trade bodies, but I mean, considering the the scale of this particular sector, I don't think this is a major issue.
Okay, I mean, at least that's what we've been observing within India. Even if you look at the Bangalore garment addas, where whenever there is a threat, whenever there is a the mobility of organized workers, and then they try to shift from one industrial area to another industrial area, because these days they've been having a makeshift arrangement of garment units, and it's easy to, like, even if it's not, the capital is not moving across the nation, but within to the states, they move to Tamil Nadu and then they go to other state. So this, yeah.
So yeah, you have a different context because you have different states. So in our case, yeah, I mean that is probably possible. Which is within the country, this is probably having some impact. Yeah, but again, I mean, I would say that say for example, Bangladesh Accord, when it was implemented, a lot of workers actually lost their job because there were a lot of farms which were closed off actually. So that happened. So so some of these can have a very detrimental effect on the workers, because the workers who lost the job, for them it is difficult, and for no good reason they have lost their job because of their owners' negligence in the factories. So so definitely there's when there are some stringent inspection policy, that can have an impact, and initially that happened with Bangladesh Accord. But as I mentioned in that eventually Bangladesh Accord was renamed and made into a national sort of mechanism. So at the moment, after 2018, when the spotlight has shifted, so so at the moment, I'm not sure what sort of role it plays, but initially its inspection policies were, very much lauded across different, sectors, and people really appreciated that. So again, we need to do a lot of research on this as well. I mean, what goes on? I mean, it is very difficult to do research in Bangladesh also on these topics, because as a brown anthropologist, I don't have much access.
Yeah, go ahead, Geeta. You're on mute.
Geeta, you're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Sumon. I think that was a very broad and very insightful talk that you presented. I was very intrigued by one of the things that you mentioned, which is DNA testing for compensation. It sounds quite appalling, actually. So if you could talk a little more about it, and if there's been a history, or is this the first time thing that was sort of introduced, and what kind of precedents does it set for a mechanism like compensation to have DNA testing?
Well, probably that after Tazreen,
and just to add, I was curious who was supposed to pay compensation in this entire scenario.
Okay. What happened is in Tazreen fire, a lot of the bodies were actually charred. So there was a need for DNA testing because people needed to identify the bodies because people couldn't identify. So that is when DNA testing was required for Tazreen fire. But for Rana Plaza, I'm not sure whether that was very much required. But for Tazreen, it was a requirement, and there was a government facility where DNA testing was done. But for the workers, for the survivors, it was a very difficult job because the family members had to go there to test and to give proof that this particular body is their own relative. So that is when it happened. So that was that DNA laboratory was in a very early stage in those days, in 2012, 13, and it was just a coincidence that we were there, so we witnessed these things on the ground. And even in some cases, some of my colleagues also were very much
We are not able to
Class-
hear you. Yeah, I think now you're back.
So, so that was one thing. And with Tazreen and Rana Plaza, after, there was this arrangement for Tazreen. So in all of these cases, usually there was a small government participation in the, compensation. So, and the rest of the amount came from the, responsible brands. So that RPA model was also there for Tazreen. That was also, there was another arrangement, but I don't have, I mean, I haven't worked on that to that extent to really inform you, but the similar kind of arrangements were there for Tazreen as well. But we have spoken about Rana Plaza today.
But is it that these workers are not even sort of named in any official registers as it happens in India? That's what happens in India, actually. We really have no, records very often as to the number. So an accident happens, especially in cases where migrant workers are involved. We don't even know who died and how many died. So the first thing the officials would do is to actually sort of hide the register, the daily attendance register or whatever. So I think, is it a problem in Bangladesh? I'm not very clear about it. Or they're all sort of, on the rolls of the factory?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while now, but as far as I remember, there's a why we were listing actually the dead, because there was some confusion with the number of dead.
Yeah.
But they usually there's a register, and I think BGMA has a requirement to have that also in their own offices. The trade body. But when something like this happens, often what happens is, these documents become very difficult to access also. So I don't exactly remember what happened with Tazreen, but we were we were having this listing because there was some confusion. For example, officially it is said that 111 or 12 people died, but in our list it was 119. So yeah, and interestingly, after Rana Plaza, which happened just 1 year after, there were many other organizations who were doing exactly that trying to have a list of workers. But these are extraordinary events also.
Yeah.
And if there's no list, then it is easy to, hide, give less compensation also. So that is an issue.
Right.
So the government has some liability here, although the amount is very less, the monetary amount.
Chat has some questions, or what is it? No.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
So in such exceptional sort of instances and tragedies, what would you think would be beyond a technical fix? Or a short term, like one is to strive towards labor rights in general and work towards better economic models, which is like the broader long term sort of an understanding. But in the immediate situation, and so what would be a non technocratic fix?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's a very important question actually. So we are just critiquing, what is there now at the moment. But I think what is important is to look at the livelihood condition of the workers. So if there's a mention of empowerment, then we have to really do the empowerment. It is only on paper that some of these arrangements are talking about empowerment, talking about workers' participation. But what happens is that in practice we don't see those sort of any substantial impact or change in those areas. So so I think there should be again, I mean, it is important to have the government taking the onus of responsibility, because they are the one who can really implement all the legal procedures. But then you can also say that there has been laws for years, but no one implemented. So I think unless there's a political will, I mean, no amount of these corporate codes or certifications will really help us. So I don't know. I mean, I sound unfashionable, I think, but as someone positioned in the global south, I mean, we have to have our governments having that will. But the problem is our governments are very much at the hands of these business people. So they even don't, during COVID-19, the first months of COVID-19, I wrote an article in a newspaper where I say that probably the workers of Bangladesh are not citizens of Bangladesh, because when everybody has a holiday, the workers are not given a holiday because on the pretext of their shipment. And so an exception was made for the workers, and the BGME, the trade body, rather forced the government to implement that exception. So I think again, I mean, it is political will of the government, and at the moment we don't see any government which is really having that sort of will. Usually there's a friction, but no clear-cut political will or guidance.
You also mentioned about a PIL that you all had filed. So what was that about, and what was the court's response to it? And was that at a Supreme Court level? Like, what were you arguing in the PIL?
Yeah, so the PIL was done at the initial months of the Tazreen fire. So it was about, we tried to, it was done by 3 of us, friends and colleagues, and it was about Tazreen fire, and we wanted to help the owner of Tazreen fire responsible for his criminal negligence. So we defined that there were ample examples of how most of his factory certifications were old, and he never bothered to renew those, and there was no proper staircases and all that stuff. So we had that, and for the first few months there was a huge response actually when the spotlight was there. So there was a for the owner there was a restriction of mobility. This was all we achieved in the first few months, but I think we all know that how justice is delayed in our part of the world. So eventually after I think a year or so, our case also, the PIL started to, the importance of that started to diminish. And it was not only our PIL, there were other organizations as well, NGOs, who also had their public interest litigations, and all of them were, sort of, suddenly there was not much activity going on. So at the moment, the status is unknown actually. So, and there was another case in the lower court that we initiated with an aggrieved worker, and even now that lawsuit is there in the court, but the government for time and again have failed to produce any witness. So it's been now many years now. So justice is delayed actually and denied.
Thank you, Professor Sumon. I think you by elaborating on these non-technocratic solutions, brought these players who are very important to be playing a role in incidents like this, whether it's the government or whether it is the judiciary and the workers themselves, leading the way in ensuring that both they are secure and safe at their workplaces, as well as how they could take that forward in terms of ensuring that their rights are ensured in their workplace. So I think you brought these important institutions into the picture. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
We have a question from Rajni. So I think we can take that, yeah.
Thank you. I just want to share a recent conversation between me and a person who was like, it is a fire accident in a cloth store near to Hyderabad. So I met that a family member of that person who has a deceased person. I met that family member. Then people told me that this person is from Jharkhand. So I initially just, I'm working for an NGO. I'm just taking the notes, the details, primary details. So when I went to into a detailed conversation, so the family member said that this is not very new for us. We have been even lost in Tazreen fire. I really don't know what is like a Tazreen fire. I don't know about that event. So I went to it and asked many friends. They told about this incident. So I came to know that the person who has died and his relatives, I mean to say family members, closed family members also died in this fire accident. But still in 2023, they didn't receive any amount or else any support from the government. So as these are migrated from Bangladesh to Jharkhand and West Bengal, some of the members. Then I, with very curiosity, asked them, so why, even though one tragedy already happened in your family, but even though you're again you are working in another company, and how it is it is that there is no impact on your family? Then the family said that for me, see, hunger is the major reason for us. So that's why we are migrating from one place to another. In that incident also, still government is saying that we did not receive any report on exactly they said that 119 members has died, but in that 119 members, there is no proper information at all. And this fire accident also, we filed a case in Hyderabad, but still it is almost 8 months. The police people and even the judicial system is saying that still we required more proofs, more information, concerns, etc., etc. So somewhere else, I felt like after this conversation, listening from all of you people, so I felt like maybe justice somewhere else we have to fight, or else the concern particular justice should be given to the families. Maybe this is not very new. Till we are talking and discussing, but even though they know that the tragedies already affected the families, even though they are migrating, maybe because of the hunger is the major main issue, where the political parties or else economic things we have to think sustainability. So that's what I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I can just add to that story is that some of the Rana Plaza workers, after having that experience, they also had to return to work actually. So we had survivors who can't work in big factories anymore. So they go for smaller factories. So it is definitely hunger and also a clear indication that how inadequate that compensation was. So they could not just, So I think if there were, I mean, this is something that I've been thinking for a long time, that, I mean, if there was a statist solution to this, then they would have had a long-term, monthly pension, and that could have saved somebody. That could have given a long-term hope. But in Rana Plaza, at least, I mean, all the data that we have, it clearly suggests that this money was actually used up for treatment, first of all, and then their daily needs. I mean, it's a small amount, and the actuarial process was very complicated. So a lot of, and then there was a distinction also. Some got a bit bigger amount, some small. So that created a lot of disbelief as well, about the whole system. So I think there could have been a status solution, but with these initiatives, I think the state also doesn't really take this issue very seriously, because what has happened is that the state has a rule, a law for the labor workers, but then the garment work is a different thing. So they cannot outright, the state is not simply thinking in terms of having one, overarching rule, law for all workers, because there are firms, smaller firms who may not be able to compensate even 2 lakh taka when there's an accident. So it has, what I would say that I don't see this discussion anywhere in Bangladesh at the moment. I mean, there are different, standards at the moment going on. That is also something that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, the very fact that the labor is the most inconsequential input in the process of production now, so, in sort of maximizing, profit or your returns, this is one factor which has been sort of squeezed the maximum, and which is available plenty in Bangladesh and India, there's a huge reserve army of what Rajani is talking as hunger, the need for employment, the need for work. So, this is an ocean of kind of almost unfinished sort of resource. So I think those things definitely work quite detrimental to the workers' cause, even in national lawmaking and all that. Gokul's point, I thought, was this mobility of labor and things like the mobility of capital. Maybe it's something which one needs to really look at very closely, because it also perhaps will lead you to the nature of the current state. What kind of a compromising state that we have, where again, this labor agency has lost its significance too. So, and I think it is not that there cannot be kind of, national federal laws. We have, all the laws essentially, it's nationally applicable sort of kind of laws. So wherever the capital moves, if you are crafty enough, you can really chase it. But the point is that you don't really want to do that. Because you are absolutely in alliance with capital in kind of in your governance mechanism. So these are larger questions of the nature of the state, and how things are shaping up over the years, and where are we really going, and whether some of these issues that you have talked about, very important issues, are ever going to be sort of addressed by anybody. In the seriousness with which it really deserves, and the workers themselves are losing because of their dire livelihood challenges. Their energies to come together, negotiate, collective bargaining, those kinds of things have again become very old school kind of concepts now. Unionization itself is very old school in very many ways. So I think a lot of kind of labor related sort of principles have changed in practice. So I think we need to definitely sort of think about collectively about some of these things, and they have definitely a larger role to play. And I think if we have, I don't really see any questions coming up. No hands raised, I suppose. Divya, can we sort of wind up then?
Yeah. No, thank you, Tara ma'am, and thank you, Professor Sumon, for that very, very insightful but very sobering. Like Dr. Tara was saying, I think just to note that even after a decade of this happening, things are exactly where they were, or even worse in many contexts. Like in India, there are absolutely stunning kind of parallels to the situation that you also described, like the apathy of the state, the neglect of the employers, and the sheer compulsion that forces so many people. In our case, migration, internal labor migration, is an added layer of vulnerability to the whole informal arrangements that exist. About 93% of the workforce here is employed as informal workers in India's case. So very, very sobering and also thought-provoking to listen to you. As Dr. Tara said in the beginning, we are a knowledge institution working on issues of informality and labor migration, and this this was our first inaugural kind of talk in the series that we are launching, and we've called it On the Move. And we're really grateful to you for consenting to be here as the inaugural kind of speaker and delivering this absolutely wonderful talk as in the first session. So just for the audience, thank you again for joining and for being such an engaged audience. I think all of you also asked very thought-provoking questions, shared experiences, like Rajni shared her experience from the ground. That was really significant, I thought. So we hope that this can evolve into a platform for more such labor activists, practitioners, grassroots workers to come together, share our experiences in solidarity with each other, so that we are also able to recognize the larger context in which all of us are operating, and the need to bring in some more structural kind of transformation into some of these dynamics that we see across the global south. So we are planning several more such talks in this series. The next one will be on December 18th, which is also the International Migrants Day, where Dr. Alexandra Masatri from SOAS, who again has done a lot of long-standing work of scholarship in the area of labor governance, especially in Gurgaon's garment cluster. She will deliver the address on that day. So we invite all of you to be there as well. Of course, announcements will go out on social media, and we'll be sure to publicize it as well. So yeah, thank you again for joining everyone, and thank you to Professor Sumon as well, and have a good evening. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye.